And give me a signal if anyone here is into software. Raise your hands if you do software. All right. Do you do software professionally or as a hobby? So professionally, as a hobby, both? Okay. In your professional work, at your company where you make software, do you have a compliance department? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, so that's about a third. Do you know what they actually do? Do you know what compliance does? Some nods, yeah, all right, awesome, you're in the right place, happy to have you. Today we're going to talk about products, after we talk about me. This is some stuff I do, lots of products. Open source, commercial open source, products. I like building stuff, right? I like cooking, I really like cooking. But products are, what does it say? I have it written here in the book. Excuse me. In the glossary, it says, a product with digital elements is a software or hardware product and its remote data processing solutions, including software or hardware components being placed on the market separately. Do we know what this means? Now, in Europe, your software is a product. What's a product? A product is something you sell, right? You have a financial interest in it. It's on the market. Maybe you're trading it for something else, but there's a market interest in it. But let's take it back, all right? That's an egg. Well, it's an AI rendering of what an AI thinks an egg looks like, right? But according to the new rules in Europe, even an egg is a product. And we're going to come back to eggs. Now, products can be dangerous, right? They can have salmonella. How do you know how old the egg is? Well, does it stand up? Does it fall over when you spin it? You know, these little tricks in water? No, you regulate it. You protect the consumer, right? Because the product, at the end of the day, is also the egg sandwich, right? It's not just the egg, and it's not just the sandwich. It's the egg and the sandwich and the bread. And how do we know this is a product? It's being delivered on a plate. Now, you think this metaphor is silly, right? Like, oh, it's a plate. That's funny, Daniel. But it's really important. It's all about the delivery mechanism. That is what the regulator is trying to protect with the Cyber Resilience Act. And I'm sorry, like, this is going to be a kind of complicated talk. We're going to talk about things like the Blue Book, the Cyber Resilience Act, the Product Liability Directive, and it's complicated. I know. I'm going to do my best to give you like a quick drive-through of the important stuff. For everything else, you can come over and get a free copy of my book at the info stand after the talk. I've got about 60 or 70 of them. Looks like that tracks. But what is the Blue Book? The Blue Book is descriptive, not prescriptive. It's a document that the European Commission has been working on for decades that tells you who you are in the context of the distribution of a product. It defines what the single market is, right? Like, so the single market begins at the borders of Europe, which is kind of the countries that signed up to be part of the European Union, the member states, their borders. So when a product enters or crosses into those borders, it's on the single market. When it's created within those borders, it's on the single market. And the book also defines, you know, who the market players are. You have a manufacturer, a distributor, an importer, an end user is part of this whole life cycle. You know, the person eating the toast with the egg on it. And it's really important because it's a reference guide. If you're in Europe and you're making products for Europe, you should really just take a fly through. It's only a couple hundred pages. I don't know if you still read books, but don't trust ChatGPT, don't trust Gemini. I've tried them all, and that's why I ended up writing the stupid book, because it is such novel law that you can't afford to have a hallucination in there. So I really recommend the things that I'm talking about, you just, you know, do your research, and by research, I mean get the PDF and read it. Don't have a summary do it for you. So what are products with digital elements? Let's break it down. A software or hardware product and its remote data processing solutions, including software or hardware components being placed on the market separately. So software is pretty clear. That's like bytecode at the end of the day. It's someone who's writing it in a higher level language, but it's software, right? It's nothing physical per se. And this gets to be the novelty of the new Cyber Resilience Act and the Product Liability Directive, because now we have something immaterial that is a product, right? It's not a consultation, it's not an advisory, it's a real thing now. So software has become real. It's tangible in its intangibility, right? And the key word here, what we're always going to be coming back to when we're trying to decide if something should adhere to the CRA or PLD is the remote data processing solutions. Let's say you have an app that's just on your device. All it does is it gets an update for itself and nothing else. Maybe it's not going to have to comply with this regulation. If it talks to a database, if it talks to another app, it probably has to. So the whole notion of distribution and dissemination of immaterial data, software, code, helps us define what a product with digital elements is. I was talking with a friend, and he's consulting in the automotive industry, so if you're working automotive, you sometimes have a mobile phone app. Now, the car itself is part of different regulations. The mobile app, however, is going to be subject to the Cyber Resilience Act. In fact, every mobile app on every app store is going to be subject to the Cyber Resilience Act, without a doubt. What we're trying to figure out right now, when you pull JavaScript into your browser, are you accepting the distribution? Does this mean that every single website now also has to comply? I mean, we'll get to what compliance means in a second, but it's kind of a little bit of a scary time. You know, everyone who didn't raise their hand before about having a compliance department, you better go back to your office and be like, hey, this is kind of important. And what is this? The Cyber Resilience Act. It's been in force since December of 2024. It will be in partial application regarding the reporting nature of cybersecurity events in September of 26. It will be in full application in December of 27. And this is the greatest part. Congratulations, you're already on board. Everything that has been placed on the market since December of 24, arguably earlier, but we'll just pretend it only means since December of 24, will have to retroactively comply. That means that you are going to have to go through the entire process of what I'm about to show you if you're on the market right now, which you probably are, because you raised your hand, you said you're in software as a product, right? Components are products. We'll talk about this when we get to the open source section of my talk a little bit later, but open source libraries are like little eggs when you make your egg sandwich. Every single one of them. You might have 10,000, JavaScript these days is 2,000 average eggs in your sandwich. Every single one of them is going to have to undergo some kind of assessment on your side before you bring it into the product, because you are going to be liable for it. The fines are then commensurate with the size of the company, you know, a couple million up to 10 or something. But the big thing, and I'm going to repeat this again later, and that's what I want you to go home with. If you do not comply in December of 2027, the regulator has the authority to prevent you from keeping that product on the market. You will have to take it off. Well, it will be taken off for you, excuse me. Like, what do you have to do? You have to have a declaration of conformity, which is a form letter that your CEO or your authorized representative signs that states you are in conformity with all applicable regulations. It's the same game that we've been doing with CE markings for decades, because it's basically, and in fact, truly, a CE marking. You have to have a user manual translated into all of the language of the European Union member states where it is in application, where it's being used. You have to have a software bill of materials for every version. And you have to maintain that for 10 years. You have to report to the regulator, in this case it'll be ENISA or the local NCC, the National Coordination Center for Cybersecurity, where the event happened, or you are registered, or your authorized rep is. You have to report within a day that something happened. As soon as you find out, you have, depending on the nature of it, a couple weeks to a couple months to resolve the issue. you must maintain the security posture of your software for 5 years, which means you must maintain security updates. If you do not maintain security updates, removal from market. Fines. And you have to keep track of this for 10 years. You might ask yourself, why 10 years? It's sort of like financial records. Yes, because with financial records, you can prove liability. And that's what this is about. Furthermore, it's not just that you can say I have conformity. I mean, a lot of software can, like your calendar app or your to-do app, maybe even your booking app is a default class. You can self-certify. You can say, yes, we're compliant with everything. As long as you have your paperwork and you do it under your own authority, you're fine. Hopefully you do it. If you didn't do it and they find out that you didn't do it, then removal from market. Important and critical types of products with digital elements, like browsers, operating systems, password managers, these have to go what's known as a conformity assessment via a conformity assessment body, which is a notified body that a national entity elevates to having the authority of certifying the quality of your product. And you have to do that every year. You have to maintain this assessment. And from what I've heard, again, you can take this back to your compliance department. In Germany, there are no more agencies that are able to take on new clients. What does this mean? Well, if you remember, this sort of comes into play December 2027. If you don't have a conformity assessment body to go through your product because you are in the important or critical group, you cannot be on the market. I mean, great business idea. Please, people, make more conformity assessment bodies, but it won't be enough. If you do not have these relations right now, it's your job to get them, find them, track them down. If you are not in Europe, you're going to need a European authorized representative. What this means is, if you're, let's say, a Canadian company and you're delivering a product to European citizens, then you have to have some entity in one of the member states that says, yes, I'm your authorized representative, and for all intents and purposes, I am you, and so when the government comes to talk to you, they go through me, and then I send it to you. That's an authorized rep. And finally, change of risk means a new declaration of conformity. We'll come back to this when we get to the product part, but if you add a new feature or something in the greater community has changed, like, I don't know, post-quantum cryptography has then decimated elliptic curves, and you weren't prepared for it in your cybersecurity risk assessment, then you're going to have your product reassessed because your threat model has changed. And if you're in things like browsers or operating systems, you're going to have to go through the whole conformity assessment again, which costs money and time. The Product Liability Directive, I promise this is the shortest one. This is only relevant for non-business use by natural persons because, remember, the regulator here is really trying to make sure that we protect the most vulnerable, and that is always the human in the room. Corporations are going to serve their interests. We have to protect people. That's specifically what the Product Liability Directive does, but it takes some very interesting choices. Like I said, it's only in the case of a person using a product with digital elements who gets harmed. So they have cause to file a liability suit. Joint and several liability. Do you know what that means, joint and several? It's pretty dumb. Basically, joint liability means everybody who contributed an egg to the sandwich, every single contributor is liable in the first instance. Then they can reduce components that were associated with the defect through the software bill of materials and some research. So everyone who is involved from the top down, you know those great like tree dependencies, like who brought in which dependency? Right? So that's joint liability. And several liability means the court will take anybody that they can. Like, doesn't matter if you're in that, if we can find you, if the court can find, if the opposing legal team can find you, that's what's really gonna happen, right? Like, if you're being sued as a manufacturer, your legal team is then going to go after everybody else who's a manufacturer or might be. Because hey, open source, might as well bring those guys to court if you can. You just have to prove that they're manufacturers and not hobbyists, right? And again, no fault liability means the consumer doesn't have to know what went wrong, just that something went wrong and it is associated with that product. Which kind of makes sense. It's like not your duty to understand that some library was defective, your house burned down, right? Like get your stuff together. And again, 10 years of records keeping because that is the length of time from the first entry to the market that the consumer has to sue you as a manufacturer. Technically, 5 years after you no longer have updates, they can still sue you because sometimes these things just take time. And then we have the open source software stewards. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this because I do recognize some friends from open source here in the audience today. The commission has designed a new type of entity called an open source software steward. If you've never heard of it before, basically think Linux Foundation, Apache Foundation, Eclipse Foundation, Commons Conservancy. That was the initial idea, that supergroups that represented smaller open source projects would then kind of not have to comply with all of the rules. And this comes with some caveats. So one big caveat is that they're not considered manufacturers because they're not participating in market activity. They're not making money from it. It's open source. That means they also don't get a CE marking, which means they don't have, as a consumer of the open source project downstream, you're not liable until you are. And then the biggest issue is if you start making money with this open source project, you are now a manufacturer with all those things that you have to do or take it off the market. So I think for open source, it's kind of a weird solution that they came up with. But I have some ideas. So I have about 6 or 7 minutes left. I'm going to try to kind of rush through the end so that my next speaker has a little bit of time. This is the important one, right? I think that this is the takeaway that you can bring back to your teams and have something actionable from this conference, from this talk at the very least. And that is keep your security assessment early at the beginning phases of a product, right? When you're beginning a new product, get security team in there so that you really have a feeling for the risks that are associated with the amazing ideas that your team has, because some of them will be untenable. Then, consult with the compliance team to make sure that you're not entering into a market that's going to require you to get a conformity assessment body, right? As product, it's not your job. That's compliance's job, but somebody has to tell you, oh gosh, we're going to need a compliance assessment body to assess the conformity of our product with the regulations of Europe. That's going to add 6 months to the timeline. That adds 6 months to the timeline. Plan all your features at the beginning. And by this, what I mean is what I said earlier with regard to such things as quantum supremacy and the death of elliptic curves, right? When you plan into your cybersecurity risk assessment something like, we use modern cryptography, however, we are crypto-agile so that we can change algorithms in case of X. Then you don't have to go through a reassessment because you've already planned for it. And that's the whole point of being secure, right? You're planning for things that might happen. Something else that people talk about is, well, when you're small and scrappy, you put together a team, you do all the R&D, you fire the R&D team, and then it's product's time to take to market. That's not going to work anymore because you have to be able to maintain this for 5 years. You have to. That changes your budget. And the moment you charge for beta, you are no longer in this kind of test mode that the government lets you carve out. Don't charge for beta. And then we have commercial open source software, which is like where I kind of find myself at home. We're trying to survive and build community, and but we can't make money because if we make money, we're a manufacturer, and then once you're a manufacturer, you have to have a legal team, and you have to have a compliance team. I mean, it's hard enough to have a security team. And then, wait, so we're using software that then someone else uses, suddenly we're liable if they're using it? Like, isn't that fly in the face of MIT, Apache 2, like use at your own risk and discretion? I'm not to blame, but I also don't prevent anyone from using it. So what we have at Tauri, that's the open source project I come from, is a pretty strict governance model where we have a board of directors that sit within a nonprofit entity in the Netherlands called the Commons Conservancy, and those members of the board are elected by the working group, and the working group is then elected by the working group, which means if you work in the community, you can come into the working group and work as part of the team. This is all great for a lot of people. However, some companies don't want to work with an open source community because how do you sign an NDA with an open source community? So we created a corporate entity called Crab Nebula, and now we're working toward, and this is something you are going to see happen more and more. I know we're not the only ones doing this, but I'll just show you our model. So the CE, the Certification Européenne, the compliant version in Europe of Tauri, has a fee. This is kind of like the fees that you get charged to join the Eclipse Foundation or the Linux Foundation, similar model. You pay more if you want more decision-making power, that's all. We already have it working though, so I know this is really hard to see. It's, it's impossible. Let me describe it to you. Basically, this is all of the components of the Tauri ecosystem for every framework, or for every platform. It's the SBOM, it's the attestation, and it's the signature, which is a requirement, right? We have all of these available on our private repository for access for our corporate users, and we have all of our attestations on GitHub, so that you can know for a fact that it's really working. And the intriguing part about this model is we are not rug pulling. We're not pulling some HashiCorp thing where right before we go public, we change the license. We actually can't. The community prevents that from happening, so it's always going to be Apache 2 MIT for the rest of time, or as long as it's a good project. And then as a corporate, you just say, hey, yes, okay, I want to have the guarantees of the CE marking of your Tauri egg inside of my product. This is, like I'm saying, this is really starting to happen over at Erlang. They're working on this, and I think also our friends at Ferris Systems are doing something similar with the Rust compiler. So, if you only remember one thing from this entire talk, the European regulatory banhammer will remove your product from the market if it does not comply. That's a fact. Just telling some friends, I'm not a lawyer, but I did write a book about it for product people. You can get it online at that QR code. If you prefer the PDF version, I kind of like the PDF version. It's easier to read at night when I should be sleeping. And it's hyperlinked, and it's got a great glossary, and I updated it, and it's a special edition for Devworld, so I highly encourage you to come over to the info desk after my talk and ask questions there, get a copy, buy me a coffee, whatever it is. That's it, thanks.